One day you went on Letterboxd. You saw that your friend just watched a movie called A Man Escaped. As an avid Letterboxd user, you know that 4.3 is usually an indicator of god-tier cinema. So naturally, you being the curious and passionate cinephile that you are, watch the movie, which is streaming on the Criterion channel, because of course it is. Criterion has everything great, and chances are you absolutely loved it. It was tense, it was emotional, it was subtle, it moved along so well, nothing about it was bullshitty or unnecessary. So who was the talented director, you ask? Well, it's this guy named Robert Bresson. In the context of great cinema, the fact that he's French is very promising, therefore you check out his other films. Again, if you're like me, you watch them in the order that they were released. Pickpocket, then Alcazar Balthazar, then Mouchette, then L'Argent. And when you finally make it through the last film you need to watch, you think to yourself, man, those movies were boring. You review said movies on Letterboxd, and naturally you surf the web to hear other people's opinions. Why? Because if you're like me, you're an insecure who can't handle having an unpopular opinion, or an opinion that may faintly suggest your inferiority in film analysis. And to your surprise, you find that the Bresson film you really didn't like is widely considered his masterpiece by the greatest filmmakers and the greatest movie critics. And so naturally, you're disgusted with yourself. Every waking hour you remind yourself, I'm the pleb that doesn't like Robert Bresson. The stench of your own breath reminds you that you're an uncultured swine. The salt of your own tears reminds you of your unsavory taste in film. The emptiness of your own wallet reminds you of how worthless you are. True story. You rethink your life, you rethink your credibility as a true cinephile, you rethink your credibility as a well-established, quote-unquote, well-established, Letterboxd pro film critic.
Look at this guy. He's not even a patron, he's a fucking pro. What a pretentious douchebag.
Hello. After making it through all of Bresson's movies, I really wanted to get the hype of this filmmaker. So, I spent my time reading. Anyways, this is what I learned. Robert Bresson is considered a transcendental filmmaker. The style of transcendentalism deals specifically with minimal camera movement and an emotional disconnection between subject and viewer. In layman's terms, the camera stays still, the angles are mostly unimpressive, and the actors give bad performances. The acting isn't laughably bad, it's more dull and empty. It's a weird approach to film because when a film is unimpressive or strives to be unimpressive, we usually think it's bad or that it's gonna be bad. Because this approach doesn't quite appeal to mainstream audiences, many people have since tried to justify this interesting style of filmmaking. Paul Schrader, the guy who wrote the script for the movie Taxi Driver, the one that we all know, the one that inspired Joker, wrote a book in the 70s called Transcendental Style in Film, Ozu, Bresson, and Dreyer. In the book, Schrader explains that Robert Bresson believed that the theatrical components, the traditional components of a film, were all creative screens. And these creative screens editorialize the events of the movie. Essentially, creative screens are good at forcing emotions within a viewer. And this makes sense. Good music can force emotions, good camera work can force emotions, good video editing can force emotions, good acting can force emotions. There's no question that the elements of film are designed to force emotions. Because if cinema can effortlessly engage viewers and provoke emotions, then it can make the big bucks. But cinema to Bresson was more than just a commodity. To him, it was an art form. He believed that a viewer who was more willing to actively engage with a more challenging film, that is, one that doesn't use creative screens or one that doesn't easily or lazily force emotions, could gain so much more from that movie on a spiritual level. I think Bresson made great points about creative screens. More often than not, in the films that I watch, I notice filmmakers using quite a few strategies to force drama that isn't really there. Music to Bresson can be a creative screen, and anyone who's seen Bresson's movies knows that he rarely uses music. If he does use music, it's usually used at the very end of a film, for the sake of satisfaction or easing the tension of a movie. Or maybe the music is there to liberate you from your boredom after sitting through an hour-and-a-half movie about a donkey. Nonetheless, I think Bresson does have a point about music artificially forcing emotion. And what I took away from my readings and my research, based on my own personal experiences, was that music can be used to disguise ridiculousness. Again, appropriately placed and well-composed music can make anything more epic or ultimately better. Some, or many, believe that to be a blessing. Bresson believed that it was a harsh detriment to his own personal vision of cinema. Simply put, Bresson's belief was that music distracted the audience from truly feeling or understanding what was actually going on screen. And to not understand what's truly happening on screen is to miss out on the purest and truest meaning and drama of the film. So without music, a movie is simply sight and sound. I wanted to talk about sound not because Bresson considered sound to be a creative screen, but rather sound was undoubtedly the most important aspect of his movies. Bresson once said, "The ear is more creative than the eye. If I can replace a set by the sound, I prefer the sound. This gives freedom to the imagination of the public. This phenomenon helps you suggest things rather than having to show them." And here we can see and hear a compilation of the sounds of Bresson's films. He made sure nothing else distracted the audience from the oral identity of his movies. And obviously, I'm whispering because I don't want to distract from them either. As you can see, or more accurately, hear, Bresson's films have a sonic quality about them that was very ASMR. And now, after comparing the works of a groundbreaking filmmaker's ASMR, I'm going to slap myself in the face and vow to never say or do that again. To adequately summarize Bresson's intent, sound is what gives movies texture. As the great video essayist Captain Christian once said, "We understand what we see, but we feel what we hear." By placing a heavier emphasis on the soundscape of his movies, Bresson tried to make it easier for his viewers to immerse themselves into his cinematic worlds. He also accomplished this through acting. Yes, perhaps the most infamous aspect of a Bresson film is the acting. On the surface, it's dull, it's bland, it's empty, it's gray. Of course, the black and white color palette of most of his films don't really help with the lifelessness of his actors' performances either. Whenever Bresson had something bitter to say about your traditional run-of-the-mill commercial cinema, he'd always bash the acting of a movie, saying, "It is for theater, a bastard art." Schrader explains that a traditional actor is simply concerned with the character that he or she is trying to portray. One obvious famous example is Harrison Ford giving Han Solo and Indiana Jones their signature masculinity that is almost irreplaceable and incredibly unique and distinct. Bresson looked down on this because he believed that cinema was more than just the audience following the story or the events or the affairs of a fictional foreign hero. For Bresson, a great film is supposed to be a spiritually enlightening experience, one where a viewer doesn't immerse themselves into the lives and affairs of a stranger. Rather, a great film should be an opportunity for a viewer to immerse oneself into one's own life and one's own psyche. And so Bresson believed that to accomplish this vision, he had to place less emphasis on the characters in his films. For example, the performance for Mouchette from the film Mouchette is as simple and minimalistic as it can be, because Bresson wanted to create a universal character. The same can be said about Anne Wiazemski's performance in Alhazard Balthazar as Marie. The simplicity of a character yields universality of said character, and universality yields relatability. Hence, Bresson's actors were no longer actors. They became models upon which audience members can imprint their own identities. Thus, Bressonian cinema as a whole became a form of visual literature, so that his viewers could make each and every one of his movies their own in some way, shape, or form. Interestingly, due to his emphasis on universality, Bresson personalized his cinema for his viewers. And this is ultimately why Bresson's works have been praised for over half a century. His minimalism had a greater purpose that was concrete, challenging, and ultimately revolutionary. We can thank Bresson for inspiring even greater and more recognizable writers and filmmakers such as Paul Schrader, who obviously wrote the book on Bresson that I read, and wrote the script for Taxi Driver, Andrei Tarkovsky, who's often called the master of cinema, and Mikhail Haneke, who's one of the most influential and beloved European filmmakers ever. And of course, no one is saying, or has ever said, that Bresson was completely right in his approach and other people, the way they view movies, is wrong. Just because The Dark Knight is a movie that heavily incorporates a musical score and has a lot of dramatic and irreproducible performances does not mean that it's a bad movie. Again, cinema is subjective. If you enjoy and appreciate the format of traditional cinema, that's okay. If you appreciate Bresson's approach, that's okay too, because Bresson's one singular, undeniable truth about cinema is that it should be personal. So perhaps give Bresson's films a try. If you're willing to pay attention to the close detail on screen, and if you're willing to sit through aesthetic filmmaking, maybe you can get a little more than just the occasional laugh, the occasional scare, the occasional teardrop. And maybe, just maybe, Bresson might change your view of cinema forever.